When we display ancient civilizations in museums, we make them look peaceful.
Pottery, art,
Architecture, trade routes, the version of the past that looks like steady, dignified progress. But behind the display cases, in the storage rooms and the academic papers and the site reports, the archaeological record tells a significantly different story. Ancient humans left behind a criminal record, and it is extensive, global, and remarkably consistent across cultures that never had contact with each other. In 1991, hikers in the Alps discovered a body emerging from a melting glacier, preserved for 5,300 years in the ice. They called him Ötzi, and for years, researchers assumed he was a traveler who died of cold or exhaustion in the mountains. Then, in 2001, improved imaging technology revealed an arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder, a wound that severed a major artery and killed him within minutes. His hands showed defensive wounds. Blood from 2 other people was found on his tools and clothing. Ötzi had been in a fight and then been shot from behind while fleeing. The story we told for 10 years, peaceful traveler, died of exposure, was completely wrong. The story the evidence actually told was an unsolved murder 5,300 years old. In 1978, archaeologists excavating a site in South Dakota uncovered one of the most disturbing mass graves ever found in North America. A single pit containing the remains of approximately 486 people, men, women, and children, dating to approximately 1325 CE. 90% of the skulls showed scalping marks. The bones showed evidence of decapitation, marrow extraction, and bodies left exposed for a period before being collected and buried together. The community had built 3 successive layers of defensive fortifications around their settlement, suggesting they had experienced previous raids and kept reinforcing their walls until the attack that killed nearly everyone. Crow Creek tells us that the pre-contact Americas were not the peaceful paradise that romanticized history preferred to imagine. Organized, devastating warfare was a consistent feature of life. Crow Creek is not an exception. Archaeological sites with evidence of prehistoric massacre have been documented on every inhabited continent, in every era of human prehistory. In the Talents Valley in northern Germany, archaeologists have excavated a battlefield from approximately 1250 BC, the oldest large-scale battlefield ever discovered in northern Europe. The site has so far yielded remains of over 130 individuals, with estimates suggesting the total battle involved approximately 4,000 warriors, organized military conflict at a scale that overturns assumptions about Bronze Age European society. The wound patterns suggest trained combatants using coordinated tactics, not a chaotic village raid, but an organized military engagement between large forces in 1250 BC Europe. The evidence that warfare predates civilization, that it is not a product of complex societies, but a feature of human behavior that complex societies inherited, is now essentially overwhelming. Across the peat bogs of northern Europe, over 2,000 preserved human bodies have been recovered, dating from approximately 8,000 BC to approximately 200 CE. Tallen Man, found in Denmark in 1950, was hanged and then placed in the bog with extraordinary care, eyes closed, in a sleeping position, as if laid to rest rather than discarded. He was well nourished, had eaten a careful last meal of grain porridge hours before death, and was placed in the bog with deliberate ceremony, suggesting ritual killing rather than execution for ordinary crime. Analysis of the broader bog body record shows that the majority exhibit signs of deliberate ritual killing, multiple cause-of-death wounds applied in sequence, careful deposition in specific locations, and evidence of special treatment before and after death. Lindau Man, found in England, was killed 3 times simultaneously, struck on the head, strangled with a cord, and had his throat cut, a triple death pattern found in multiple bog bodies across different regions. The triple death pattern appears in bog bodies across regions that had no contact with each other, suggesting either a shared ancient tradition or a convergent belief that certain deaths required multiple simultaneous methods. Çatalhöyük in Turkey is one of the world's earliest large settlements, inhabited from approximately 7,500 BCE and often cited as evidence of early peaceful communal living. For decades, it was presented as an egalitarian, peaceful proto-city, 8,000 people living cooperatively with no evidence of hierarchy or violence. Then, forensic analysis of the skeletal remains revealed that approximately 25% of the population showed evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull, the specific pattern associated with interpersonal violence, not accidents. Many individuals showed repeated injuries, the same skull hit multiple times over years, suggesting sustained interpersonal violence within the community rather than isolated incidents. Çatalhöyük was not a peaceful cooperative utopia. It was a densely packed community of 8,000 people where a quarter of the population was being regularly hit in the head. For centuries, the ancient sources claimed that the Carthaginians performed child sacrifice, burning children alive as offerings to their gods. For much of the 20th century, scholars argued this was Roman propaganda, invented to justify the Roman destruction of Carthage in 146 BC. Then a comprehensive 2014 study by Oxford University analyzed the remains from the Carthaginian Tophet, a sacred burial site, and confirmed that the ancient sources were essentially accurate. The remains showed burned infants and young children, accompanied by inscriptions explicitly dedicating the children to the gods, across 600 years of Carthaginian history. Child sacrifice has been archaeologically documented on every inhabited continent. It was not a unique aberration of one culture, but a recurring human response to perceived supernatural crisis across dozens of unconnected civilizations. In 1999, 3 Inca children were found at the summit of the Uyayaka volcano in Argentina, preserved at over 22,000 feet for 500 years, sacrificed as offerings approximately 1 year before the Spanish arrived. Analysis of the children's hair showed they had been given increasingly large amounts of coca and alcohol for approximately a year before their death, and their diet had dramatically improved in their final months, suggesting they were prepared with care for what the culture considered a great honor. The children were not killed by enemies or criminals. They were killed by communities that genuinely believed it was necessary, possibly by families that consented or were honored by the selection. The Romans did not hide their violence. They built 45,000-seat stadiums to watch it and made it the most popular public entertainment in the ancient world. Over the Colosseum's operating life, millions of animals and tens of thousands of human beings died as public entertainment, and the games lasted for nearly 500 years with enthusiastic public support. A gladiator cemetery discovered in York, England revealed the specific killing patterns, blows delivered from above to a kneeling person, consistent with the documented finishing blows shown in arena art. One of the most famous images associated with gladiatorial combat, the thumbs down for death, is reversed from what the evidence actually shows. The thumbs up meant kill him. We have been dramatically misrepresenting Roman violence even in the ways we dramatize it. Slavery has been documented in every complex ancient society ever studied. It is not a specific cultural invention but a consistent feature of human social organization across every civilization that accumulated enough surplus to make owning labor economically viable. The oldest written records in human history, Mesopotamian clay tablets from approximately 2100 BCE, contain detailed accounts of slave purchases, prices, and legal disputes over enslaved people. Iron slave collars have been found across the Roman world, some with inscriptions translated as, "I am a slave, seize me if I run away, and return me to my master," worn around the necks of human beings. In ancient Athens, the birthplace of democracy, an estimated 30% of the population were enslaved. In Sparta, the Helot population that the Spartan citizen class depended on represented approximately 80% of the total population. The Athenian democracy that Western civilization claims as its origin, the philosophical culture of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, was entirely sustained by the labor of an enslaved underclass that no one in that philosophical tradition found ethically problematic. Archaeological evidence of cannibalism, both ritual and nutritional, has been found on virtually every inhabited continent across virtually every era of human prehistory. In Goyet Cave in Belgium, Neanderthal bones show cut marks consistent with the systematic defleshing and marrow extraction of other Neanderthals, the same butchering patterns applied to animal bones found at the same site. The cut marks are in positions that indicate the deliberate removal of muscle from bone, not accidental damage, not animal activity, but systematic processing of Neanderthal bodies by other Neanderthals. At Gough's Cave in Somerset, England, 14,700-year-old human remains show that the inhabitants were systematically cannibalizing the dead and carefully shaping human skulls into drinking cups. The skull cups required skilled preparation. The skulls were carefully cleaned, the irregular edges removed, and the interior smoothed, suggesting this was deliberate ceremonial practice rather than emergency survival eating. At the Cowboy Wash site in Colorado, archaeologists found remains from approximately 1150 CE that showed evidence of extreme violence followed by cannibalism. The bones of 7 individuals showed systematic butchering, cooking, and consumption, including a cooking pot that still contained human myoglobin, a protein found only in muscle tissue, and a coprolite containing human DNA. Archaeological evidence of psychoactive substance use has been found in virtually every ancient culture that has been studied in sufficient detail. The use of mind-altering substances is older than writing, older than agriculture in some regions, and appears to be a near-universal feature of human culture, not a modern problem or a cultural exception. In many ancient cultures, psychoactive substances were deliberately cultivated and used for ritual purposes, considered sacred technologies for accessing spiritual states rather than recreational vices. Returning to Ötzi, the full picture that emerged over 30 years of analysis is of a real, complex person, lactose intolerant, suffering from parasites, carrying medicinal plants, wearing sophisticated multi-species clothing, who had a carefully prepared last meal and was then murdered by someone he was fleeing from. What the full archaeological record consistently shows is that the idealized version of ancient humanity, peaceful, cooperative, spiritually wise, living in harmony, was never real. The concept of the noble savage, the idea that primitive humans lived in natural harmony before civilization corrupted them, has no archaeological support anywhere in the world. The ancient criminal record and the modern criminal record contain remarkably similar items: organized warfare, ritual and political killing, exploitation of the powerless, substance abuse, tribal violence. The uncomfortable truth is not that ancient humans were monsters. It is that they were exactly like us, with the same capacities for cooperation and violence, creativity and cruelty, love and exploitation. The evidence does not show us fundamentally different creatures. It shows us ourselves, with fewer tools but identical psychology, facing the same internal conflicts between cooperation and exploitation that we face today. Ötzi's murder is still officially unsolved, the first homicide in European history that we can document in detail, and we still do not know who did it or why. The criminal record of ancient humanity is also the record of extraordinary achievement, care, creativity, and community. The same species that was scalping enemies at Crow Creek was also painting caves at Lascaux and building observatories at Stonehenge. We are their continuation, not their improvement, not their correction, not their evolution into something fundamentally better. The record is coming out of storage slowly, imperfectly, against institutional reluctance, and what it shows is a past that is far more useful to understand than the comfortable version we preferred. The dead keep their records, in ice and in peat bogs, and in the bones buried under the cities we live in now. The past is not a warning. It is a mirror,